In this lesson, we're going to add some more of the Tellington tea-touches to your repertoire. And I have intentionally not paired each of the lessons with like touches. So I haven't done all the circular touches together, all the lifts and all the slides. And I just wanted to kind of make sure that you have an overview of how to do the work. Now, not to worry, we have videos of each of the touches separated. So besides the videos, you can go back to any of them to get more practice to figure out the techniques and so on. So we're going to start off this one with the bear touch, and it is one of those touches that is often confused because the bear, the raccoon, and the tiger touches all look quite similar on the surface. So the raccoon touch, it's the tips of the fingers. The bear touch, you go right up to the nail, and your fingers are near each other, are fairly close together. They're not smashed, but they're close together. The tiger, fingers are still curved, you're on the nail, but your fingers are apart. And they feel quite different when you can sort of feel the differences of them when you compare them on your own arm, or you compare them to someone, let them feel it, and they'll give you that feedback. So with the bear, we're right up on the nails, and the fingers are just lightly touching each other. So the pressure that we're going to use will be between a 1 and a 4 pressure. So it is actually fairly light. It's not just that idea of kind of going in quite deeply. You're going to press straight into the tissue. It's a very tiny circle when you're using the nail. 1 1/4 circle, pause, and then slowly release. The benefits, you can use this under a cool cloth over itchy areas. It does allow you to go deeper into heavily muscled areas without pressing harder. And it almost feels like as you go into the arm, for instance, that you would, as you go straight in and you make this little circle, you feel the depth, but without the pressure. So that can be really, really nice. And it also, if you have a mosquito bite on yourself, you can use the bear touch, tiny little bear touches, and it often relieves the itching. A variation might be to have your fingers slightly spread apart, not as wide as the tiger, but a little bit apart. And the other thing is that when you have the end of the bear, when you come to the end of the bear, you can also use the sponge as an ending. So you do this tiny circle, there's a pause, and then just allow your fingers to feel like they're being pushed out, or the sponge is filling up after your fingers. The turtle touch is not really written about in any of the books. And I remember it started with a 37-year-old turtle named Myrtle, and someone brought her onto a course and they put her in my hand. And so I put my hand on top of her, and I just started moving my hands in the same direction, but starting at opposite points. So I usually do either 1 1/2. It's also not usual that you would do that much of a circle when we're doing the touches, or 1 1/4. So if we were to think about, because people often think, well, you're going in different directions. Actually, you're moving in the same direction. This is a little bit of an exaggeration, but you're starting at different points. So this would be, if you think about the wheels on a train, the way that they move, it's a little bit like that with the turtle. The only difference, of course, is I'm not making a large movement. I'm just doing the slight movement of the tissue, not rubbing across it. And there should be a pause at the end of each of the circles. Otherwise, it just becomes like a rubbing motion, and that's not the intention of the turtle at all. So when you could use it, I often find, here's my trusty little friend, that on areas such as the shoulders, the ribs, or the hips, you can simply put your hands on, and then it's this little movement, a pause. And then I can release that, can move to another area. I can pause. I could also, and a nice variation that I like to use, so I make this circle and often it's maybe a circle and a half or a circle and a quarter. I pause, and then I'll have one hand lift up a little as the other hand slides down. And then I pause and I come back. And then sometimes I change that direction and I pause and I take my hands in the opposite direction. So in this case now my left hand slightly supported the tissue up and my right hand went down. Now it seems like a strange thing to do, and yet when people feel it on themselves, on their shoulders or their arm or their leg, they're actually really surprised at the depth that you actually feel the touch. Now you could also simply do a little turtle, a pause, and you could do a python lift with one or with both hands. I personally find that it lends itself well for this little movement. And again, I'm not sliding, I'm actually, the tissue moves, so it's a tiny little movement, and then it comes back around. There's a video that will follow this. So the inchworm is another touch that is kind of falls into, it's really like a lift, but it's a lift on a parallel line, if you could say. So generally what we would do is we would place both hands on the top of the back, except you won't be able to see his back. And then, so I've got both hands on the top of the back. And what I tend to do with most of this, things like the inchworm, is I take a breath in. And as I exhale, I slowly bring my hands towards each other by moving tissue. I pause, and then I slowly carry it back to where I started. And in some cases, it feels quite nice to go, take your hands a little bit apart, and then bring them back to the starting point. Now, why might we use this? It can really help to relieve tension all along this whole back and neck area. And it's, well, when you feel it on yourself, and I will do a little video of showing how you can do it on a person. If you happen to have someone in your house that you could experiment with, they can give you feedback and you'll be surprised at how much you actually feel. Now, one thing with when you're doing it on a human shoulders, our shoulders tend to be much tighter than a dog. The tissue of a dog moves more easily. Just know that you don't have to move it a lot to have a big impact. Now, one thing you can do is put your hands on, and I take that breath in. And as I exhale, I imagine that my hands are moving towards each other by moving tissue. I pause, and then I slowly think of carrying it back out to where I started. The thing is that when you think about doing something, your hands will actually do something, but in a very small way. And that can be extremely interesting. The other variation that I do, which I've done often on snakes, is have one hand on the top and one hand on the belly. And I'm going to move my top hand towards the dog's head and my bottom hand toward the dog's tail. And I pause, and then I take it back to where I started and the other direction. Now, this could be helpful on dogs that have really long backs, that it can help to kind of allow the back to come up and also then release the back. And that's where I find, so these long back dogs can benefit them greatly. The octopus is one of those touches that is extremely difficult to write the directions of. So I will do this mostly on video, and the next slide shows pictures of the steps to it. It started with horses on their legs, and it's fantastic for increasing circulation and helping to ground a horse. Now, personally with dogs, the only time I really use it on legs is on larger dogs. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't, but because the movement on the leg is more complicated than it is on the body, I generally have people start along the body. It can be really wonderful to connect the body front to back. And this is a move that you want to do on a dog that you know fairly well. It's not going to be the first thing that you do with a dog, because you will be standing over them a little bit. It can also really help to have a sense of grounding for dogs as well. So here's a picture of sort of the photographs of starting this. So basically my hands are starting so that they're like a little, you could think of like a little W. And I'm going to slide, I can slide down the shoulders, the top of the shoulder, and then I'm going to come down around the chest, and then I can come back over the shoulders, cross my hands down the sides of the ribs, bring them back up, and I can continue this little crossover until I get to the back end of the dog. And when I do, I'm going to come down the inside of the hind leg. And then what I tend to do as I'm coming down is curve my fingers, so when I touch the ground, I'm actually making contact with the back of my fingers. And this can be much easier for dogs who are sensitive about their feet to actually accept that. I could repeat that exercise, and I could end up by going down the back of the hind legs as well. So you'll see at the end of this PowerPoint, I'll show you on a little stuffy or in a video. So lick at the cow's tongue. It is another one of those touches that we use a great deal on horses. On horses, it's wonderful to come under the belly and turn your hand and go over the top of the back. It helps to connect the belly to the back. So there's a little bit of a raking motion that happens. So there's this smooth motion. So I'm going to usually use the little bit of the flat of the hand, or potentially a slight curve to my hand. So you can use it lying down as in these diagrams, or you can use it when the dog is standing up. Generally, you're going to go diagonally across the lay of the hair, or you could go with the coat. And that will depend a little bit on your dog, of course. It's just generally that's the preference that most dogs have. You can experiment and see if your dog has a preference and finds it all right to go more against the coat as well. So, I don't think that this dog is going to allow me to actually, I don't think you'll be able to see. So I will simply show you the octopus on a dog in a different video.